Welcome to the Tears and Miracles podcast, an audio diary of a young woman who is a follower of Christ, called to hear from the Lord and share with the world. Tune in regularly to hear the latest episode, and you can also find her content on YouTube under the same name, Tirza Miracles. Hello and welcome back. You're listening to episode 2, recorded on December 18th, 2020. In the first episode, I shared with you a word that I had received from the Lord on November 26th. And at first I thought that this episode that I'm recording today would be the first, which is my testimony. But at the time, I felt that the other should go first as it was more important. So I'll just start off by saying that this is all really new to me. I can say that I would have never pictured myself doing anything like this even a few months ago. But as we know, God's plans are always greater. So of course I can't give you my entire life history in one sitting, but I'll just share briefly about my background, and then I'll go into how I came to do what I'm doing today. I am a young woman living in Canada. I came here when I was a little girl with my family from a country in East Africa. I've grown up in a Christian home where I was shown a great example by my parents, who I would say are like pillars in my life. I thank God for them and how they've poured out their lives for myself and my siblings. They've been a really great example of what true faith can really look like. And they're those kind of people where as soon as you meet them, you come to find out that they're the most genuine people that you'll ever meet. And of course I'm biased since they're my parents, but that is truly what they've been in my life. And then there are my siblings. I have a brother and a sister. And they too have been such wonderful, God-fearing people who have come to, not just love because they're my siblings, but because the love of Christ is the greatest bond between us, between basically everybody in my family. So I can't call that luck. There is no such thing as luck, but I do count myself to be the most fortunate to have had the kind of family that I do. I know that it's not the same for everybody. Some are called to follow Christ alone. Others, you just have one other person that, can walk with you on this journey. But I can say that in my family, I have been so blessed. And how was my life growing up in such a family? As I said, I grew up surrounded by my parents and my siblings who are all, we're all practicing Christian values. And so I was brought up around the things of God. And I can say for my parents, especially, they were very serious in teaching us the Word of God. And there were also other examples around me, in my extended family, in the church, or even with family friends. And like most people who grow up in a Christian family, there's always that aspect of group mentality. The feeling that, since my parents are believers, therefore automatically you become a believer too. And that may have been true to a certain extent. But I can see that God was drawing me out ever since, I was young, to the point where today I can say that my faith is my own. It is not because my parents are believers that I am too. It's just like how the Bible says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and they wouldn't depart from it. So I can definitely see that that's how it's played out in my life. I can't say that this happened in a single day. It's been more like a journey where the Lord has been constantly, separating me and sanctifying me from when I was a young person. The foundation that my parents laid is, of course, a big part of that. But I can also say that without a doubt, I've sensed God in my life. I've never doubted that He existed. I've seen His hand in many, many, many ways. And I can see that He's sort of, weaving His story into my story. And so the older I get, the more I see His hand, and the more I see the bigger picture of what He's trying to accomplish. And I can say, honestly, it's wonderful and it's miraculous, how He weaves different things into our lives. So yeah, to God be all the glory. As I said earlier, we moved here when I was young, and so part of my childhood was spent in my home country. And growing up there was quite different than being in Canada. For one, people there look like me. They spoke my language. So in a way that made life easy because you didn't have to explain as much. There were a lot of those shared values. In contrast, coming to Canada, there were so many diverse cultures that it took a while to adjust. But even with that, there were so many advantages of living in a multicultural country. For one, being unique is not frowned upon. Unlike in my home country where if you don't behave like everybody else, like you stick out like a sore thumb. But as we know in general, no matter where you are, the Christian road is not very popular. So you will end up sticking out regardless of where you are. But I feel that living in Canada, it did allow me to be who I wanted to be. There were people from all backgrounds who practice all types of faiths. So in a way, being unique was not a bad thing necessarily. It was okay. Everybody else was unique, right? So that really gave me the space to walk out what I've been taught without the pressures of conforming so much to the cultural norms. So even with those advantages of living in a diverse culture, there are still those regular pressures to be, with your friends, to do whatever you see the other kids doing. So regardless of the country that you're living in, there are going to be those consistent pressures that you face as a child growing up. But I know God's hand was on me throughout. I know there could have been many times where I would have compromised. If others were doing certain things, I probably would have wanted to join them. I'm not a perfect person by any means. So, if I had wanted to join the crowd, I know that what kept me back is not me. There was definitely that unseen hand working through it all. So I grew up, finished high school, and I entered university, and there too, God guided me. I think in every stage of life, things progressively get tougher, and that's where you start to see more and more that you need God in your life. And I can say the same for when I got into university. Because of course there were the normal stressors of exams and classes and having to figure out what I'm doing, career choices, that whole thing. But even in this period, I can see that as I look back, that God was molding me. It was definitely a trying time, and there were also other circumstances, not just school. There are, of course, the usual challenges that we all face, whether it be health, family dynamics, what have you. There's always something that is always a challenge in life. But even in my most difficult times, even in the lowest times, God has been that rock for me. So when I was done with university, I moved out of my parents' home to another part of the country, and I moved out with my sibling. So it was good that I wasn't out there all on my own. And I can say that that's when my life officially started as an adult. By God's grace, we settled and God began to establish us. So it wasn't easy living by ourselves, but if it wasn't for that foundation that I mentioned before, that's always what I go back to when I find myself in a new situation or a new environment. I always go back to what have I been taught? What are the principles that I can apply to that new situation? And so the challenge now became, would we continue in the faith? Would we continue in the ways that we had been taught? It's easy enough to do what you've always done, especially with the same people around you. But when you're on your own, that's when you really find out who you are. And for me, that's when it became a daily walk, not just something that you do part-time, but a full-time walk with God. So to make a really long story short, I have made it to where I am today, just by God's grace. It's definitely not been my own doing. My life has been filled with many challenges, many ups and downs, and it's been those experiences that have led me oftentimes to the cross to show me that I couldn't have made it by my own power. Kind of like that Bible verse that says, not by might nor by power, but by God's Spirit. And good or bad, those are the experiences that molded me to be where I am today, to be firm in my faith, to be able to boldly declare that God is my God. I know that regardless of whatever lies in my path, He will be there just as He's been throughout all my life. And I know that I can trust Him for whatever is to come. So that brings me to today. I am just an ordinary Christian woman, and that is basically my testimony of how God guided me so far. Although it's not been something that I would have considered doing myself, sharing the story through my podcast. But I felt increasingly led that, during my quiet time, the things that God is sharing with me, that He wants me to, share that with other people. Because those things that He is sharing, they are important, not just in my life, but they could benefit other people as well. So that's where I want to leave it today. I will be sharing more in future episodes. But for now, I hope you are encouraged to hear my story, which is really God's story, how He's working in my life. And so in the meantime, take care and God bless.